Is it possible that we've been grappling with the same problems lifetime after lifetime, and that we have some kind of soul or other spiritual self that thinks that it's a good idea to keep coming back and to keep experiencing suffering in different ways because of all the amazing lessons learned? Well, today, that's what we're talking about when we talk about past life regression. Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to the Death Dhamma podcast. I'm a Buddhist practitioner out here in the world, having experienced the loss of my loved ones and knowing how much my Buddhist practice helped me on my grief journey. And now, together we have this safe space to discuss death, dying, grief, and the Buddhist teachings that help us really understand attachment, impermanence, being compassionate, being death ready, and what it means to live a life so that we can have a peaceful death. Yep, it's a big topic, and we're going to take it on together. Let's go. Hello, my podcast friends. Welcome. And as our special and interesting guest today, we have Simon Bown, past life regression hypnotherapist. Podcaster also, by the way, he has two podcasts, Our Paranormal Afterlife and the Alien UFO podcast. And there's a statement that he has made that I found in his bio that I thought was really interesting. It goes like this. There's something more to us than flesh and blood, and that we are energetic beings working through a cycle of reincarnation with the aim of experiencing everything there is to be experienced as a human being. So I think you can see with our emphasis on Buddhism and how many of us consider rebirth, that Simon's expertise in past life regression is an area of interest for us all on the Death Dhamma podcast. So Simon, welcome, and please feel free to elaborate on that introduction.
Okay, yeah. So I've been working as a clinical hypnotherapist for years, and that was working with helping people stop smoking and weight loss. But I only ever really wanted to do past life regression, and I've been taken through past life regression myself since the 1980s, and got all this insight into reincarnation. And so I trained really hard to do past life regression therapy. So I've been working with that mode to do therapy with people, and it's been amazing the results that can come through by hypnotically taking somebody back to a past life. And so that's what I've been working at for the last few years and hundreds of sessions.
Oh, that's beautiful. And first, before I continue, perhaps you can tell everyone where they can find you.
Oh yeah, my let's see, the website is pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. And on there's all the information that I have about past life regression and past life regression therapy. Because sometimes people contact me that to just do an exploration, just to see what comes up, and they're not looking for specific therapeutic outcome.
Mhm.
And on there's the testimonials, people talking about their experience with past life regression, and there's a calendar on there that you can go into my calendar, and I will do a free 20-minute consultation call with anybody. Just book it in and we can talk about what you might want to achieve with past life regression.
Wow, everyone, I really would say go do that because I think that sounds very interesting. And another point, so this season we are talking with people who are helping others with the relief from suffering, release and relief from suffering. And so in your work, you are helping with your hypnotherapy sessions. And so I'm thinking that there are ways in which a past life regression might help me recover from something that's occurring for me in this life. Is it fair for me to say it that way?
Yeah, yeah. Something happens. And even when I was in college with our tutor and I was training in hypnosis and hypnotherapy, even he was saying, we don't actually know for sure how it works, but it does work.
Mhm.
And I've seen emotional healing and physical healing through doing past life regression.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I usually start people with a basic question about the truth of suffering. And I'm never tricking people. I'm just always curious about people's definition. In Buddhism, where we have the Four Noble Truths, we have this, the truth is, that there is suffering. We suffer because of, clinging and attachment. Different traditions may say it different ways. But if you expressed, based on your experience of what you've seen of suffering, how would you define suffering?
Well, it's something I wonder about with past life regression, there's and reincarnation, the way that I see it is that
Mm-hmm.
we come here to experience being human, and a part of that is suffering. And so people may plan their life before they come here, they deliberately think, I'm going to have a life where I'm going to suffer. And it could be for all sorts of reasons. Maybe it's rejection, or it's a physical thing, or it's, um, yeah, we can make up loads of stuff, can't we?
Sure, sure. But you
But
don't have to because you have experience of what you've really seen.
yeah, yeah. But one of the one things I wonder about is that there's suffering on Earth, and the human race has always had suffering. And I wonder if we'll always will have suffering because our souls want to come and experience that.
Mm.
But then at the same time, I feel that Earth isn't the only planet where we incarnate. And they talk about Earth being a really tough school. So there must be other tough schools around. So maybe the Earth can move forward and the human race move beyond suffering. But it's going to take a lot of work and a huge paradigm shift on Earth for the human
Hmm.
race for that to happen.
I can see your point because even from the Buddhist perspective of, we keep coming back until we gain that release, that in itself is, many, 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 I can't even say how high a number of lifetimes, and it's different for each of us. And so when we think of a time when all of us have experienced that release from suffering, given how many there are and how many lifetimes, it does seem like a really difficult to achieve goal that all beings will be free. And yet, on some level, that is the goal, but I don't think we're close to it today. Can you share an experience of you really coming to terms, and connecting with your truth of this understanding of us, coming to experience and choosing a certain kind of suffering? How did you really come to terms with that?
But I think that was when I was taken through past life regression and seeing how emotionally impactful it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've seen three different lives, and each one, the life I lived, I was rejected, and it was quite a horrible rejection. And there was one of the lives. It's weird how this stuff comes up. It can be so random and unpredictable. I
Mm-hmm.
saw myself as a man in Mexico 200 or 300 years ago, living in this town, and I wasn't very clever. And my parents looked after me, and I'd get jobs here and there, but I'd always mess up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd always lose the job. And eventually, my parents died, and I was living on the street, and it was like the whole town saw me as just a pain. They all
Oh.
rejected me, and they just wanted me to go. So there was that huge kind of rejection there. And then there was another life that I saw where I was a woman, and this was in London, like 1950s or early 1960s. And in that life, I had a partner, and we were together, and it was like 3 years in love. And they said to me one day, I'm just going to go back home for a couple of days and visit my parents. And it's like, okay. And they just didn't come back. And eventually I received a letter saying, I'm marrying someone else. That's it. I'm off.
Ouch. Okay.
So that's another huge rejection, and that's suffering. But you can see between those two lives in Mexico and the one in London, the type of rejection, the way that they were rejected were completely different
Yes.
ways. And so it seems to me like that there's suffering there, there's a lesson there, and there's the soul is learning from this,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it just shows how many lives you might need to live. If there's so many different ways of rejection, then you're going to have to live all those lives, and then you might move on to the next thing that you're working on.
I see.
And I also feel, sorry, I was just going to say, I sometimes hear people say, well, reincarnation, I've had it. I'm not coming back to Earth. I've had a terrible time in this life. But that's like a human viewpoint. Your soul may be looking at that and thinking, wow, this was a great learning experience. I'm definitely coming back.
Oh, okay. And I see that. And I've had others express that to me as well, too, that we are in this before we come, we're in this other plane. And yes, so we're making these choices of what's the best way to return to keep learning. And that is a difficult thing to talk about, to to talk to someone who is having a really difficult time here now in this lifetime, and to say that you may have chosen this. I remember one time having a discussion like that with a friend, and at some point, I stopped and I was sorry I even brought up the concept because I saw that it was really upsetting to her. And she had a hard time thinking of what is the benefit of my bringing myself into a life where, I've been abused by my family. And so I don't know what my question there is there other than like, but that is something that ultimately could be helpful and is a choice we make, right?
There's a way that it all works that I seem to have a small grasp on it. And I think that there's so much within reincarnation and our lives, so complicated, but it seems as though you work with a group of souls. And before you're born, you kind of get together and you agree which role you're going to play in each other's lives and how you're
Mm-hmm.
going to help each other with the lessons that you're going to learn. And it's almost like putting on a play where everybody's got the script and the plan for the life, and you all interact in different ways. Maybe somebody in your current life you're very close to and you're having a great relationship. In another life, they might have been really mean to you, but that
Mm,
was almost like it's harder to be the perpetrator than the victim because you're doing it to help them, but you don't want to be mean as a
no.
soul. But then, there's this thing, I think the soul is like a higher being in a way, and we're just a small fraction of that higher soul as individuals.
And in that scenario, and I like how you describe that like a play, I think that like a play, and there's different roles, and then there's different acts, and then a play ends, and then there's the next play. And sometimes a group of actors do continue on, right? Sometimes if you belong to a community theater group, you see the same people,
Mm.
but in different plays over and over again. So I appreciate that analogy. And in those scenarios, and everyone's being helped, I would think, though, right? Because is there one soul that's so unselfish that would just keep popping up in someone's life but never gaining their own lessons learned?
Yeah, I think that can happen. I think the impression I get is that when we come to live a life on Earth, it may last 70 years. But
Mm-hmm.
from the soulful viewpoint, it's just 10 minutes.
Ah,
And it's a great learning lesson. And it may be that in your group of souls, there's the star of the show, like in the play, and you'll just be one of the supporting actors, and you'll come in and help the story move forward, and it affects that main actor in some way.
mm-hmm.
But it may be for you, you are coming in to help out and help that soul learn their lesson.
Right.
And that's the thing they talk about in these soul groups or these soul families. It's very much love and support amongst them. And I was taken through a past life regression, and I saw myself as this young man in London in the 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and I had this new suit on, and I just had my hair cut, and I thought I looked fantastic. And I'm strolling around, and I walked into this pub, and then suddenly I shot up through the ceiling, and
Hmm.
I ended in this kind of spiritual space with my soul group. And I got this tremendous feeling that they were so happy I was there. They were so pleased I was back. And it was
Okay.
almost like a party. And then one of my soul guides was there, and they came over and they were so pleased to see me. So it's this thing where when you all work together,
Mm-hmm.
it's totally supportive, trying to help each other out, learn these lessons, get these experiences, because ultimately your soul is progressing.
I love that. I love that. Now, at some point, so you've had this experience with your own regression, and it's helped you. For example, you were sharing with us the thoughts around rejection and the different forms of rejection. And so at some point, I think this brought you to a place where you decided to help others. When did that happen? How did that happen that you thought, oh, if this helped me, I can help others?
Well, I think it was just a gradual itch that grew and grew and grew. And I wouldn't say there was one particular incident.
Okay.
It was something that I wanted to do for a long time. I think that we're all on a spiritual path, and for me, this is part of my spiritual path. And I wonder about spirit guides maybe nudging us, and they drop little nuggets into our subconscious, so to speak, to move us
Hmm.
along. And they might present us with amazing synchronicities, or we have these psychic flashes, or you'll think of someone And the next thing you know, they're ringing you. Or you think of a song you haven't heard for 20 years, and then the next moment it starts on the radio. And how did you know this was going to come up? And it's these little things that kind of show you there's more to the universe than just what's black and white, what's
Mm-hmm.
physical around us. And so I was moving down this path, and I had gone through a past life regression that was really impactful. And that was when I thought I really want to do this, because you can really help people with this. And I wanted to do it properly. So I did do a full 10-month course at college studying clinical hypnotherapy. And then it was
Wow.
after that I got certified in past life regression therapy. So I really learned how it all works and how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I look back on my life where I wonder if all these different things I've done have almost been like, oh, this is you in training for when you do the past life regression, or when you're doing the podcasting. Because I've been a musician all my life, and I've learned
Mm-hmm.
to record music at home, and I know how to use all the software. And so when it came to being a podcaster, I already knew all that stuff, how to record it all and put the music together for it. So I wonder if, there was all that training. But I did do a past life regression. There were two of them, actually. There was one where I saw myself as a small girl in a park in London.
Mm-hmm.
And in that life, I went on to become a nurse in the First World War. And
Wow.
this was really close to the front line. And it was all these British soldiers coming into these kind of mobile hospitals with these terrible wounds. And I remember this feeling of running up and down between these beds, and felt like 2 o'clock in the morning, and these men were just coming in. And I was getting frustrated because my skirts were getting caught on the bed.
Yeah.
And it's that thing, and that would never have happened to me being a man. And also this frustration felt old, like I've been dealing with this for years. Why do I have to wear these clothes? You know?
Oh, interesting.
And there was also this park at the beginning of the regression where I saw myself as a little girl, was very distinct shape.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a couple of years later, I was in a part of North London, and I saw that park, and it was really clear that that was the from the past life regression. I'd never
Oh,
been
that
to
that
that
was the
place
actual
before.
physical spot that you had been?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that was interesting verification. But then I did another past life regression where I went back to that life, but this time I was maybe 30 years old,
Uh-huh.
and I was standing in the street in London with a man that I realized was my husband. And there was some really bad thing we needed to deal with. And I was saying to him, it's okay, I can deal with this. And he had this really condescending, patronizing attitude of kind of, oh, you're just a silly little woman, you can't deal with this. And I felt quite angry. And it was this feeling of, you don't know what I'm capable of. You didn't see the years I spent in the war dealing with these terrible things day after day. And you don't realize how strong I am and how capable I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that was a big impact because I'd never had a man talk to me like that before.
Right.
And getting that perspective from the female side of it. And so that really jarred me in a way and made me think, wow, this is really powerful. And so it's not that I ever had real suffering and I went to past life regression to get healing.
Mm-hmm.
I was always kind of investigating, and I just wanted to see what came up. But those two things kind of triggered me to say, I really want to get into this and start taking people through this.
That's terrific. Gosh, I'd really like to tell you that, what you experienced in that life where somebody was condescending to you because you're a woman. I'd love to tell you that that doesn't happen anymore, but I could
No.
not look you in the eye and tell you that because it does still happen. But I am happy to meet someone who has an understanding. And, because in life, it's nice if we can have an understanding of one another's paths so that we can be more empathetic to each other. Now you bring this work to the world to help others. And it sounds like there are times when somebody might come to you directly for this, but there could be
Yeah.
other times when you might be working with someone and you recommend it. And so, how do you know when a past life regression could be something that would really be of value to someone who's come to you?
Well, it may be that they have something, it could be emotional or physical, and they're saying, I just don't know where this came from. I've got, or like they'll say, I've got this terrible pain in my stomach. and I've had it for years. And the doctors have done the I don't know, the MRI and the CAT scan, and they've prodded me and X-rayed, and they can find nothing wrong, no reason for this stomach pain, and it's just always been there. And
Mm-hmm.
so you think, well, there's no origin point in this life to cause this pain. And so you think, well, maybe a past life regression would help.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also, I had a client who was a woman who came and said, I have a terrible relationship with my mother. I always have. We've just argue all the time and I just can't get on with her.
Mm-hmm.
And the client, she was about 50, 55. So, this is her whole life.
Yes.
And that there was no origin point for that either. So it's like you go to a past life and see if something is bleeding through that is not helpful that we can clear in some way.
Okay.
And like the guy that had the stomach pain,
Mm-hmm.
we went back to one past life where he was stabbed in the stomach and killed.
I see.
And then there was another past life regression we did where he went to a past life and he did something that made him feel terribly guilty. And I said, if you think about your body and this emotion, where is it? And he says it's in my stomach. And so I've got these techniques where we can release the energy or cut the bonds to the past life.
Mm-hmm.
And he emailed me a couple of weeks after the session and said he couldn't believe how much the pain has decreased. And it wasn't completely gone, but he said he sits watching the TV, prodding himself in the belly to check because the pain's so little compared to what it was.
Wow.
And that woman emailed me like a couple of weeks after the session and said,
Mm-hmm.
I went to my mum's house for dinner on Sunday, and it was the first time I'd gone through her front door in 20 years where I wasn't angry immediately.
Wow.
So you can see how there's something happening here. But
Yes.
it's also, like I said before, nobody, I think, can really say what is happening or how it works.
Mm-hmm.
But it does work.
So knowing that we might not know exactly why or how, I have a process question, and I don't know if it's answerable or not. When somebody comes to you and does that past life, how do we know what life to go to? Like how, like how if you were working with me and you did a past life regression and I went, I don't know where, let's say 1900, how do I or you, how do we know that that's the place to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's part of the hypnotic induction where we invite the client's spirit guides to be with us. And I asked the client to say, spirit guides, please can you come and assist me with this past life regression? And then we ask the spirit guides, take us to the past life that is the origin point of this issue. And so your spirit guides know all your past lives. And that's kind of how we do it. We say, take us to the origin point of this. Occasionally, we'll go back to this person's childhood in this life because that's where the origin point was. And then when we get into that past life, there are techniques like I might say, I'll count you down from 5 to 0. When I
Mm-hmm.
get to 0, you'll move to a significant event in that life, an event that is the cause of your current life's issues. And so we go targeting and hunting down these incidents in these past lives. Occasionally, it's could be something that's coming through from several past lives. And so it can be traumatic sometimes, but there's ways of kind of moving away from the trauma, but still
Mm-hmm.
finding out what's going on. And then that's when we would start doing the healing and the releasing of the negative energy.
In this kind of work, would you do, for lack of a better term, like one session at a time? So you work with me and you call in my spirit guides to help bring me to the place, I'm going to say like the most important place or the first place we need to go to help me with the healing of what's impacting me in this life. And then we count me down to 0. And then I come to this, the most impactful place. And then we process that. And then do we finish and then maybe come back another time, or do we keep going? How do you know when it's time to bring Margaret back out of this? How do you know when to do that?
Well, the session is an hour long, the way I do
Oh,
it.
okay. So there's a timing
And
to it.
yeah, and we might find this incident, this thing that was a cause. And so will go through a process. There's one that's like agreeing to release a certain percentage of this negative energy.
Hmm.
And I ask the client, I say, well, does your subconscious agree to release this? And sometimes the client will say yes. And then after we've finished the hypnosis, they'll say, I don't know where that yes came from. I didn't say that. It just sprung out of me. And
Ah.
I say, we'll get an agreement. So how much of this energy can we release? Could it be 50%, 60%, or are we up to 90% today? And so it's all about talking almost symbolically and visualization,
Hmm.
talking about how you imagine there's this golden healing light coming down through your body, and that's affecting the negative energy. Because there's another visualization that I do where I say, imagine that you are a being of light and that you can look down in your body and see yourself, and there are dark patches. And so now you reach inside your body and you pull out those dark patches and you throw them away. And after you throw them away, those patches will leave a space. And now this golden healing energy is coming in and filling you with high frequency energy. And so it's kind of symbolic and it's like
Hmm.
visualizations. And the way we do clinical hypnotherapy with stopping smoking or weight loss is it's the same sort of thing. It's symbolic, but it does seem to work. And one thing made me laugh was that I did this technique about looking down at yourself and taking out this darkness and throwing it away.
Hmm.
But we were in this space in the hypnosis, and the spirit guide was there with the person because they show up sometimes during the past life. And I said, have we released the negative energy? And the spirit guide kind of laughed and said, yeah, it's sort of crude what you're doing, but it does work. And I almost felt like, yeah, the spirit guides have probably got much more sophisticated techniques for healing you than something I would do.
Well, that, the bringing in the light and letting go of the dark, in some ways that seems very similar to in Tibetan Buddhism. There's a kind of meditation called Tonglen. And so it's interesting to see, the similarities of approaches, which just shows that these approaches, I believe, shows they work. But that comment by the spirit guide, I guess I want to say back, well, then why don't you show us a better way? And is it what, so I mean, I would think you might have thought something like that. Well, okay, if what I'm doing is crude and it works, help me, help me. So what would be the answer, do you think, to like not showing you a better way?
I don't know. I wonder if they can work in what we might call the spiritual space. So they
Uh-huh.
would work with your spirit, your soul, and do something energetic and something they have access to that I would never have access to.
Oh, okay. So it's a
Because,
function of what of skill set and access and expertise, I guess, things like that.
yeah,
That's fair.
sometimes I'll ask the spirit guide to I'll say, is it appropriate for you to give the client some healing right now? And the spirit guide say yes. And then my client says, well, they've stepped forward now and they're kind of moving their hands over my body, but their hands are like 3 or 4 inches away from your body. It's like they're manipulating the energy
Oh, like a
or your
Reiki
soul.
kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. It's you have these examples where you've really helped people. So sometimes I ask a question, about, have you had a moment where you really realized this was your path? And it seems like you have several moments and continual moments that keep you on this path. Is that true?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Hmm.
I've done hundreds of sessions and it never feels like it's work.
Ah, there
It's
you go.
fascinating. And
Hmm.
you have a connection with the client and there's different levels of past life connection that people might have. Sometimes I'll do a session, they might see 5 past lives, and
Hmm.
that's not down to me directing them at all. Sometimes we'll be in a past life scene and I'll say, just allow yourself to move to the next relevant memory. And they're in another past life. And it's the spirit guide moving them around.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, so for me it's fascinating, I suppose. And people get back to me with these, how they've recovered from certain things. And occasionally they find the person who was the past life.
It
And
is
that's always
fascinating.
interesting.
I think it is fascinating. Do you find common themes or some really common causes towards suffering from past lives that we tend to carry forward because you've had so much experience? Is it something where you could look at different categories of what we carry with us, or those common themes of suffering? Do you find something like that ever?
I see family relationships come through a lot,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's with brothers or sisters or with parents. And it seems that these patterns of these relationships go across different lives. And some, like I was saying before, there was the mother and daughter, and they had that terrible relationship in a previous life.
Mm-hmm.
But other times it could be two brothers in a previous life, and then in this life they're mother and daughter. But there seems to be something in relationships and emotions there,
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder if it's coming through, and it shouldn't be. And so we're helping release stuff that shouldn't be there, which seems a bit weird to me because I almost would imagine the spirit world and the afterlife and how it all works to be perfect in some way for some reason. And
Mm-hmm.
then we have a glitch here. There's been a mistake or something with this energy.
Well, I would wonder if because so many of us, the predominant teaching around the globe, or parts of the globe, maybe not around the globe, is this idea of the afterlife for hopefully people, especially in a Judeo-Christian meaning heaven, and heaven is supposed to be perfect.
Yeah,
I wonder if that's where
yeah.
we inherit that from. Okay. So I'm wondering if sometimes you have some particularly heavy sessions, and what do you do to help like keep your reserves up? How do you keep your energy where it needs to be? What do you do to keep yourself replenished?
Well, I space the sessions out. I think that really helps me. Is I might set up my calendar so somebody books a session on that day. I'll close the calendar down for the rest of the day. So I'm only doing that one session.
Okay.
And my calendar's not open on Fridays and Sundays, but I do work on Saturdays
Hmm.
because, there's people, they work 9 to 5. They can't do the session on a Monday to Friday.
Hmm. That makes sense. And is it mostly in person?
No, it's mostly on Zoom.
Okay. I was just thinking that. I was thinking, well, yeah, you're working with so many people from so many different areas. They can't all be traveling to you. So it makes sense that it would be online. Based on what you've learned from these regressions, do you have any tips for us that will help us in this life so that we can release some of these things that we're carrying around with us from lifetime to lifetime?
Well, that's a difficult one to say. When I do a session, the last 15 minutes of it, we go into the space between lives, and that is where we'd hope to encounter your spirit guide. They don't always show up, but
Mm-hmm.
most of the time they do. And one of the questions I ask them is, can you tell the client how they can have a stronger connection to you? How can they communicate better? And they almost always say meditate.
Okay.
That's what they recommend. They always have this message of saying you are loved and we are always with you. We're always on your side. So that they're the messages that come through from the other side when I'm doing those things.
That right there, I think for most of us, if we could walk around knowing that we are loved and that there's someone who's looking out for us in a positive way, could be so useful on so many days in so many situations, I really think. And I find your work so fascinating and so helpful. And I find myself like not knowing everything to ask you, and then we're constrained, of course, by time. So what I want to ask you is, what else would you like to share? Is there something you were hoping to get to speak about and I just didn't bring you to there in the discussion? What have I not asked you that would really be helpful for everyone?
Well, I do this podcast, Our Paranormal Afterlife. There's over 300 episodes, and they're all interviews with people who've had amazing experiences and do research. I talk to people who've had near-death experiences. I talk to doctors and nurses who work in hospice, and they
Hmm.
see things happening when people die. And then I've talked to people who do research with children with past life memories, and you get all these verifications of what these children are talking about. And it's this thing I'm finding that there's evidence there that shows that we are a soul living through many lives, and there is an afterlife. And it's not something that's based on faith, it's based on research, particularly with near-death experiences where people leave their bodies and
Mm-hmm.
they'll see something while their body's dead. And then they talk about it afterwards, and the people confirm. They say, yeah, that really happened. You couldn't possibly know that because you were dead at the time. We were giving you CPR and we had you hooked up to these machines that showed your
Mm-hmm.
heart stopped and your brain function was flatlined. And I talked to Dr. Eben Alexander, and he was professor of neurosurgery at Harvard Medical School. And he said that when your body's like that and your brain's like that, it's impossible for you to make and retain complex memories. But this is what we see happening. And some people will see things that are miles away from their body, and that those things are confirmed.
Okay.
So that's one thing I would want to kind of put across, that there is this evidence of consciousness continuing after death, and it's based on research and kind of confirmation of evidence.
That's beautiful and helpful. And so everyone, to know more and to focus on some of these episodes, I just want to remind you again that the podcast we're discussing is called Our Paranormal Afterlife. And so you can find that and zero in on the episodes that are of interest to you. And that will help share the research that Simon is telling us about. All right. So before I let you go, I'll just check. Is there anything else you would like to share with us today?
Your spirit guides and your soul group are always with you, and they love you, and they're always on your side. And what they say is, if you need help, then ask for it. That they won't step in and help you unless you ask for it. And that's almost something I've asked the spirit guide is like, well, if you love
Mhm.
us so much and you see us suffering, why don't you just help? And they said, no, you've got to ask. It's about free will, and it's about what your soul has chosen to experience. But they're on your side.
Thank you for that. As a person who one of my lifelong lessons is asking for help, I will tell you that I have grappled with that, and that even just recently, like in the last few months, because I do share that belief of spirit guides, that I did finally get it. I mean, other people have said something similar to these. They're here, they love you, but you have to ask them. And I guess part of me was walking around thinking like, why isn't anyone helping me? And then
Yeah.
finally sitting down in meditation one day, because I'll do a traditional more Buddhist meditation, but I will also do a meditation where I'm trying to connect. And finally one day I just was like, please help me.
Yeah.
And I got the answer not right away, but fairly quickly. So it did reinforce. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your generosity with your time and all of your experience and the work that you're doing to help everyone on this planet and probably other planets too, by sharing your skills and by helping people with their past life regressions and by speaking so freely about your own experience. And so I just want to say thank you for being here. And I think this is going to be of great help and interest to our listeners. Thanks so much. I've got books for you, starting with Carpooling with Death, How Living with Death Will Make You Stronger, Wiser, and Fearless, the book that got me going and helped me to discuss going through the death of my loved ones, followed by Sitting with Death, Buddhist insights to help you face your fears and live a peaceful life, based on season 1 of the Death Dhamma podcast. And just recently, Enlightenment Unleashed, how your pet can lead you to spiritual transformation, because during our lifetime, we may see the rising and ceasing of many pets, and we love them like they are our family. Find these on Amazon.com or come see me at margaretmaloney.com. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, margaretmeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now. Is it possible that we've been grappling with the same problems lifetime after lifetime, and that we have some kind of soul or other spiritual self that thinks that it's a good idea to keep coming back and to keep experiencing suffering in different ways because of all the amazing lessons learned? Well, today, that's what we're talking about when we talk about past life regression.